So in the last video, we were discussing about the histology and then the liver and the associated ducts. In this video, we are going to get into the important aspect, the main objective of this chapter, that is digestion. So how every single nutrient you take is going to be digested, at what level, to how extent it is digested, everything is going to be seen. Every single point that I am going to tell is going to be an important point for you. I have tried to concise the process as much as possible. I don't want it to split into 2 or 3 videos. So kindly pay attention to the points that has been told. In our normal routine, we try to take some balanced diet. Assuming that we take a balanced diet, we will have carbohydrates, we will have proteins, we will have fats, we will have vitamins and minerals and other nutrients that needs to be digested by the body and has to be sent to our cells for what? Energy production. So how our body handles each of these and at what level what is happening is what is the discussion going to be there for the next 20 minutes. So we are just going to take some important sites of digestion. The first important site that we'll be discussing is about the mouth. The second one will be stomach. Third one at the intestine. So we'll be discussing an important role of the pancreatic enzymes and also the intestinal enzymes. Please make a note that these two topics are very, very important. If you remember in the last video, I was talking about that one definite question, and that will be either from stomach or intestine. If you take 2018 and 2019, questions were from stomach. 2020 question was from intestine. They asked you about the pancreatic juice activation, right? So mostly it is asked from these two topics. So at the same time, please don't neglect mouth also. Sometimes 2021 can be from mouth. So study the process of digestion completely, understand what are the events happening and everything. Now, let's get started with the most important organ in day-to-day life, mouth or oral cavity. So here we will be having two important events, mechanical events and chemical events. Every part of alimentary canal has got some mechanical events like muscular movements and all, but mouth has got a significant mechanical event. So what is the mechanical event that happens with mouth is mastication of food. It is grinding off all your food grains and all is what is called as mastication of food. So this mastication of food is going to be helped by the saliva that is going to be secreted from the salivary glands and through the mucus. Please understand, through our entire GIT will be having mucus and its role is just to lubricate the secretions. Okay, so we'll be having some amounts of mucus that will be there. So what is going to happen is, as this mastication is happening, all the food grains are going to be broken down into smaller particles like this. And all the smaller particles is going to aggregate into a Tirupati Laddu form. And this Laddu form is called as bolus. It is called as bolus. Right? Now, what is the chemical event that is happening? The chemical event is mainly starch digestion. Okay, so partially starch is going to be digested. So this is a very important aspect. I have seen this point frequently in NEET mock papers. This saliva, which I told, it contains enzymes like lysozyme. It has got some mucus. Along with that, it has got a very important enzyme called salivary amylase. So amylase itself, it indicates that it is going to help in the process of carbohydrate digestion. So the starch that we take, about 30% of starch, say suppose I take 100 units of starch, out of which 30% of the starch is going to be broken down by the salivary amylase. It is going to be broken down by the salivary amylase into a disaccharide like your sucrose or maltose, anything, right? Any either of that can happen. So mostly your NCRT says maltose. So 30% of the starch is acted upon by the salivary amylase, and we get what nutrient? We are going to get maltose. This happens at almost a basic pH, or I can say very slightly acidic, that is pH of 6.8. So what you need to know from here, about 30% of the starch is going to be digested to maltose by the salivary amylase at the pH 6.8. So this bolus will contain 70% of starch and 30% of maltose. So finally, as a result of mechanical and chemical events in mouth or oral cavity, I get something called as bolus, that is your laddu form. This bolus is going to enter via your esophagus. So it is going to exit. It is fed up with oral cavity because it did nothing except just digesting 30% of the starch. So it is going to get to your esophagus. So this process is called as swallowing, or to be more technical, I call it as deglutition. So there are some question papers where I have seen the process of swallowing of food is called as dash. This is the question. Simply just have to choose deglutition. So the food is going to enter into esophagus. From the esophagus, what will happen? Esophagus evolves a thin tube-like structure that is just going to convey the contents into your stomach. Right? So how it is going to convey the contents into your stomach? By the process called as peristalsis. So here no chemical event happens. So it is just purely the mechanical event, that is your muscle contraction, that we call peristalsis. So this is what happens with your food at your level of oral cavity and then your esophagus. So the food that you take in, when it reaches the stomach, it will have 100% proteins, which means what? The protein is not going to be digested, fats are not going to be digested, right? But some amount of carbohydrate is digested. So approximately we have got 30% of maltose along with some vitamins and minerals. All those are negligible. So we're not going to discuss on that in detail, right? So this is what it is. So all your vitamins and minerals will mostly be absorbed from your ileum and jejunum aspect of your small intestine. So the next thing that we need to discuss is about the events that happen with your stomach. Stomach is important. Now, the bolus, it comes. So this is my esophagus. Here I have got my laddu. And this laddu is entering into stomach now. Once it enters into stomach, you have got action of all the enzymes, the mucus and all. This bolus is going to be converted to a more pasty form that I call it as chyme. Right? And this is accomplished by some churning movements. Okay, so you all know, right? No, a mother, when she prepares buttermilk or something, she just churn the curd and the water so that the contents get mixed up. The same thing, once the bolus enters, there are going to be some churning movements given by the stomach, and that is going to convert the bolus into a juicy form, that is chyme. Now, this chyme is going to get for digestion. So stomach is the major site where your protein digestion will begin. So your carbohydrate digestion began in your oral cavity. The next important nutrient, that is your protein digestion, will begin in your stomach. Not complete. Again, it will begin, which means what? It is not completely digested. Okay. So we will see what happens with proteins and all. So before that, the examiner's favorite question will be the glands and its secretions that is present in the mucosa of the stomach. So we have got peptic cells are your chief cells. What is the meaning of chief generally in a business? He is going to be head of that particular company or business, right? Chief. So here similarly, if you take in the stomach, I have told you that major event that is happening is protein digestion. So which means what? The structures associated with only the protein digestion are going to be the chief of the stomach. So peptic or chief cells. So these cells are the chief of stomach, and hence it is going to secrete some enzymes concerned with protein digestion. So what is the enzyme? It is pepsinogen. So I hope you all know the story, right? The next one is about parietal or your oxyntic cells or oxyntic cells. So these cells are going to secrete another important enzyme that is required for the activation and all. It is HCl. And along with that, you all know, I have told every structure has got some mucus secreting cells or your goblet cells that secrete mucus. So major two ingredients of your stomach is pepsinogen and HCl. Two types of questions: chief cell secrete dash, oxyntic cell secrete dash. Sometimes they can give you the other names. So please make sure that you read the other names too. And I have given a possible way in which you need to remember chief cells, protein digestion as the chief event happening. So the head of stomach is a chief cell that is going to secrete pepsinogen. The remaining thing is parietal or the oxyntic cell that secretes HCl. So what is going to happen? In our food, the chyme is going to contain huge amounts of proteins undigested. So what is going to happen is this pepsinogen. See, always remember, I have told already, any particular substance that ends with GEN is called as zymogen, and it is going to be an inactive protein. If you remember, we would have studied angiotensinogen in case of RAAS, renin-angiotensin system, right? So it's an inactive protein. Again, pepsinogen is an inactive protein. So what is going to happen as the chyme contains more amount of proteins, the chief cells secrete pepsinogen. HCl is going to be secreted from the oxyntic cells, and that HCl is going to convert pepsinogen to pepsin. So this will be the major event that will happen in the stomach. And this pepsin will convert proteins. It will partially digest proteins to form proteoses, which means again and no, not a completely digested product of protein. So partial digested product proteins, proteoses and peptones. So this is the chief event that is happening in your stomach, right? Now, very important thing that can be asked in your NEET is about which of the following contents are present in the stomach or the gastric juice of the infants but not adults. Very important question. Now infant, they take mother's milk, right? That mother's milk contain a calcium based protein, casein proteins, and for digestion of those proteins we have got enzyme called renin. This is different. RENIN. This comes in kidney. That is from your juxtaglomerular apparatus. That is going to increase the BP. Right? That is different. Here, this is RENNIN, renin. That is purely present only in infants' gastric juices. This is going to help in the digestion of milk proteins, which is not needed in adults. Right? That is the thing that you should know here. Right? So these are some points that you must know with respect to stomach. Now, coming on to intestine. So we have seen about the hepatopancreatic duct and all that. So intestine is the where pancreatic juices will also land and intestinal juice will also come and land, right? So let us talk about the pancreatic juice first. Most important question they can ask, one is on activation of the pancreatic juice. Other one is they can ask, they can compare the contents of pancreatic juice and intestinal juice and they can ask you a question. Please remember the process of digestion is going to happen in this way. First in the mouth, next the stomach, next the contents of pancreatic juice, finally the contents of intestinal juice. Pancreatic juice is going to contain enzymes. Let's start from carbohydrates. Carbohydration enzymes are called what? Amylases. Proteins, what they are called as proteases. Fat digestion, we call it as lipases. There are three major enzymes, right? Along with this, we have got nucleases. What is this nucleases? Nucleotide digesting enzyme. We also take some amounts of nucleotides in our diet. All that also has to be digested. That is going to be taken care by this nucleases. Now, the most important ones of pancreatic juice are trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, never mind my handwriting, and procarboxypeptidase. Okay, trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, procarboxypeptidase. All these are your important enzymes of pancreatic juice. Okay. Now, what happens is this trypsinogen is the primary enzyme of pancreatic juice, which means what? This enzyme has to be activated only when pancreas can be active. If trypsinogen is not activated, other enzymes cannot do any work. Okay, this is the story. So what will happen is trypsinogen is going to be activated to trypsin, and this trypsin in turn will activate other enzymes. The question that was asked in 2020 NEET was, which of the following enzymes or factor is responsible for activation of trypsinogen? Your answer was an enzyme called enterokinase from your intestinal mucosal cells. So enterokinase from the intestinal mucosal cells, it is going to activate trypsinogen to trypsin. This trypsin is in turn going to activate all your other enzymes. So this trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, all these once activated, what is going to happen? I'll just write it as short because we're running out of time. Trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, procarboxypeptidase, proteases, all these enzymes, they are going to convert the remaining proteins, the peptones, proteoses, all these were products of stomach digestion, right? Into dipeptides. So into a simpler form so that the intestinal enzymes can just come and break down into its simpler form, right? This is what is going to happen with respect to proteins. Now coming on to carbohydrates. Now amylases, right? So what is the role of amylase? Is to convert all your complex polysaccharides to disaccharides. So all your starch and other carbohydrates are going to be acted upon by amylases to get disaccharides. Then you have got nucleotides in your diet. This will be acted upon by your nucleases, and we are going to get, all your nitrogenous bases are going to be present. That is going to be activated. Sorry, it's not nucleotides. All your nitrogenous bases are going to be acted upon by your nucleases, and we are going to get nucleotides. I'm sorry. Nitrogenous bases, or I can say simply your all your nitrogenous base complexes, nucleic acids. I can simply call it as nucleic acids. So all your nucleic acids are acted upon by nucleases, and we get nucleotides and then nucleosides. So if you take your pancreatic juice role is to just convert all your complex substances to a milder forms, like your dipeptides, disaccharides like your sucrose, lactose, maltose, etc. And then to convert all your nucleic acids to your nucleotides and your nucleosides. Okay, so here it is not actually nitrogenous base, it is nucleic acid. I'm really sorry, it's just nucleic acids. Okay, so this is the role of pancreatic juice. Now, once the pancreatic juice is done, we will be having the intestinal juice that will act upon all these and it will break down into simpler forms. Just observe dipeptidase or dipeptides we have. So it is acted upon by the intestinal juice which contains dipeptidases. We get amino acid. We have disaccharides which are acted upon by disaccharidases like your sucrase, maltase, lactase, all that. All those are disaccharidases. They are all going to be broken down into glucose and other simpler forms. They have got nucleotides, nucleosides. Those are acted upon by your nucleotidases. Then nucleosidases. They are going to be broken down to nitrogenous base and your sugar molecule. So if you take your intestinal juice are going to be the final step of digestion where all your complex substances are broken down into simpler forms. So all these enzymes constitute your intestinal juice or what I call it as succus entericus. What is that called? Succus entericus. So, if you look at the process of digestion, we saw what happens at mouth, what is the enzyme that is going to be responsible in the carbohydrate digestion in the mouth, right? And what are the requirements, how much amount of starch is going to be digested. Then deglutition, then we saw the events that happens in stomach, what are the structures involving, and protein digestion happens in stomach. Then comes the pancreatic juice. You should know about the enterokinase from the intestinal mucosal cell, and each enzyme has got what role. So almost mild simpler forms like dipeptidases, disaccharides, dipeptides, nucleotides, everything is formed by the action of pancreatic juice. And then we have got intestinal juices are also called as succus entericus that is going to act finally and convert your all your milder simpler forms into very simpler forms that can be absorbed by these cells. Now just adding a note on lipid digestion, just two points about it. So you will have bile that is going to come to the intestine. Okay, so bile is going to enter into your intestine. So what is going to happen is once the bile is acted upon on the fat molecules, slowly the fat molecules are going to be broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. So you will have bile acting, you will have lipases from your pancreatic juice, from your intestinal juice, everything is going to act. You have fatty acids and glycerol. This fatty acid and glycerol is going to be converted into something called as micelles. These micelles are formed in the intestinal mucosa. So what is this micelle? These micelles are round structures which has got polar red outside and then non-polar red inside, so that it can facilitate the absorption. Okay, so lipid substances will find it difficult to pass through almost lots of cells, so that these are going to be arranged in form of a micelle or rounded structure with polar red outside and your non-polar red inside, so that these molecules can easily pass through these cells. So this micelle, all your fat and your fatty acid, glycerol, all these are packed into a round structure called micelle, which is formed in the intestine mucosal cell. Then this gets into the intestinal epithelial cells called as enterocytes, where they are broken down into smaller molecules called chylomicrons. These chylomicrons, it is going to be absorbed by the lacteals which are a part of villi, and it is going to enter into the systemic circulation. This is the story. So fatty acid and glycerol, since it cannot pass through every cell, it is packed into a structure called micelle, which has a polar head on the outer aspect, non-polar head on the inner aspect. Then it is being broken down into chylomicrons on the enterocytes or the intestinal epithelial cells, and these are absorbed by your lacteals and it enters into circulation. So this is the thing that I wanted to add on lipid metabolism, or how fats are absorbed. This might be a bit lengthy video. I'm really sorry for it, but I cannot stop the process at one point. It will become very difficult, right? So meet you in the next video. Thank you all. Bye.